Good evening, everyone. Welcome to I think it's the 28th annual MLR meeting, the Water Connects Us All meeting. It's wonderful to be here. It's amazing that we're year two doing this Zoom online exercise, I guess is what we can call it, socially distancing. I see so many familiar faces on the list of people here that I've worked with over the years and that have worked together. You know, you have worked together, I've worked with you. Some of you I've known for over 20 years through this organization. And it's really gratifying, I guess is the word I'm looking for, to see you again virtually. And perhaps someday soon we'll be able to meet in person, and that'll be a lot of fun, I think. So I regret that we're online again, but thank you for coming. This is your organization, I guess, is the point that I wanted to make. You make MLR, not not us doing it. You're doing it, and I think we can all take a lot of pride in this organization that we've built together, and a lot of gratitude for what we've been able to accomplish together, which is significant. I was talking today with one of our board members, John James, and sometimes it seems like public policy work it's frustratingly slow sometimes. But what I've learned over the years is that it seems to happen real slowly all of a sudden. And when you look back over 28 years where we were back in 1993, when some cabin owners on the west end of Pine Island got fed up with escalating property taxes and started this group to where we are now, it's remarkable. So slow and steady wins the race. And last year we actually did pretty well in the legislature, and I'll get into that. And MLR as an organization is doing exciting things, and I'm excited to share that with you and catch you up kind of on what's new, what's going to be happening next summer and this next legislative session. We have a little bit of business to take care of. So first, I'll the 2021 Board of Directors election took place by official ballots via mail prior to this meeting. Each nominee for director was elected if he or she receives a majority of the votes cast. The four nominees on the ballot received a majority of the votes cast, and they are Barbara Halbach-Fishberg, Sue Hanken-Thielen, John James, and Mary Mans. And it was pretty much unanimous. There was a few no votes, but two or three. So thank you to the board. They are taking a more active role in the organization and really providing a great deal of insight and direction as we move forward. It's an exciting time. And then I will, if you would like, I have the minutes. Barb Halbachen, who is our secretary, thank you, Barb, for doing this work, sent me the minutes to the meeting from last year's 2020 Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Water Connects Us All annual meeting. It was December 2nd, again virtually, and we convened at 7:35 p.m. and the notes of the 2020 annual meeting were attached. It was advertised. I called the meeting to order, welcomed everybody, including the staff, Judy Corrigan and Henry Erdman, for their contributions over the year. The 2019 annual meeting minutes were available if someone wanted to see them. John James, the treasurer, prepared a financial report, and we did okay last year despite the pandemic, which is the good news. And we're a little bit behind this year, but I think we're going to be okay. We'll make it up. People are still getting their renewals in, and that seems good. We will have. Last year we didn't have the financials finished, and we were going to report them in our 2020 annual report, which came out last January. We're planning on doing that again. I provided information regarding MLR's legislative agenda for last year, coupled with facing the challenges of the legislature resolving a deficit situation and the pandemic environment. Areas of a concentration last year on our legislative agenda were watercraft operators license, Lake Steward program, protecting AIS funding, the county-wide AIS prevention aid formula, and boat cleaning stations on starry stonewort-infested lakes. We had some speakers last year. Dr. Nick Phelps, director of the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center, presented information on developing a data-driven approach to risk-based decision-making for aquatic invasive species. And with data collection and analysis, high-risk pathways of transporting AIS can be identified. And then Jim Chamberlain, a farmer from Pine River, Minnesota, provided information about agricultural runoff that can threaten state waters. Building soil health has become a major tool to improve the situation. Lance Smith, a Minnesota State rangeland management specialist, and his panel presented information on grazing management and water quality. And then Dorothy Whitmer of the Gull Lake chain of lake associations presented, and she led efforts on Gull Lake to start the Lake Steward program in order to protect the water quality of Gull Lake. And she provided information on how other lake associations can start this program. Attendees were reminded to renew their 2020 MLR membership, and the annual meeting adjourned at 9:58 p.m. Respectfully submitted, Barbara Halbach and Fishberg, Secretary. If anybody would like a copy of these minutes, we can send them to you. I would ask, if you look, you can see a thumbs up or thumbs down. I'll make a motion that we approve last year's meeting minutes. And if you just click that thumbs up, I'm seeing some thumbs up come in. Looks like it's unanimous approval. They're still rolling in. Yes, I haven't seen any no's. So email us or let us know if you want a copy of those, and we can send them to you along with financials if you want to see something before we come out with our 2021 annual report in January. I'd like to thank Judy Corrigan for all of her work. Judy has been with this organization since the very beginning, and she is integral to everything. When we're talking about programs or efforts or the Aquatic Invader Summit or our legislative agenda or how to deal with different issues, Judy and I have periodic staff meetings, once a week, and then we talk on the phone more than once a week. It's a real partnership. So thank you to Judy. And Henry Erdman has been the MLR lobbyist since, I believe, 2021, 2022, or I'm sorry, 2001, 2002. So almost 20 years. He's very highly regarded down at the legislature and is a wonderful asset to this organization. And so thank you, Henry. He's just in a business that is very difficult and frustrating. Henry is just kind of steady and calm and keeps the peace. There's one other person that I would like to introduce, and that is our new hire, Kayla Hanke. Kayla, are you? Let me see if I can find you here on the list, and I'll make you a presenter, and you can. welcome or introduce yourself to the membership. I'm having a little bit of trouble with my... Okay, Kayla, you should be able to hop on now. Looks like it's thinking. So we have hired Kayla as our civic organizer and program manager, specifically with regard to the Stop Starry program, but you'll see her taking on other roles as well. Kayla, you want to pop on and say hi?
Am I on?
Yeah.
Hi. Hi, well, I'm Kayla. It's good to be here. I'm really excited to be joining the team. I have some background in teaching, and I've always liked being a leader in my community. My hope is to lead these lake communities towards coming together under the common cause of preserving water quality. So, you might have heard from me already. If you haven't, you probably will be hearing from me soon.
Thanks, Kayla. It's been great working with Kayla and getting to know her, and she's doing a great job. She started just 3 weeks ago, I believe, 4 weeks ago. So the next big news we have, and I hope it's live, but after the meeting, you should be able to go to www.mnlakesandrivers.com and you will see our new website. The old website was about 12, 15 years old. The web designer that we work with, Jack Wheeler from Blue Hat Design, put it together. He is the one. I know that a lot of lake associations are, in need of web hosting, and MLR does host websites. And Jack is the person you'll be working with, and he'll set you up. It's a great site. It's simpler. It's easier to navigate. It's got better tools on it. The Citizens Action Network is kind of upgraded to the point where you can, when you sign into it, it'll take you to the Legislative Action Center, which is a portal into what's happening at the legislature. So all of the bills that we are tracking will be listed there, with whether we're for or against them. The status of those bills will be listed there. So as it moves from one committee to the next, you'll be able to track that. It has a tool for media. So if you type in the zip code of the area that you're interested in, let's say you want to write a letter to the editor of your of the local weekly paper where your cabin is located, you can plug in that zip code and it'll give you the contact information for the local media, radio stations, print media, television. If you want to get out a press release, it's super, super simple. And it'll just, I think, do a lot to really keep people up to speed and engaged. The other features on here is we have a library of the webinars that we've done over the years and the new webinars that we'll be doing in the coming year. And it has everything from Summer Book Club, which was really popular. And we partnered with the Minnesota Historical Society to select titles that would be of interest to people with lake homes and cabins. We have a new banner, The Kids Jumping Off the Dock, which is, I think, just a great, great image. Because that's really what it's about, that heritage piece, right? The family, the one generation to the next, passing Minnesota's lakes and rivers in as good a condition as we found them to the next generation. There is webinars on preventing AIS and the impacts of boat wakes on lake ecology, and soil health seminars, septic system seminars, legacy issues, how to pass your lake home or cabin from one generation to the next in the best possible way. It went live today, probably about an hour ago. So I'm sure there might be some mistakes, some issues, maybe a typo or two. We've been really kind of furiously working away on it here. So please check it out. If you find something, let us know. If you find a mistake or a correction, or you have a suggestion, let us know. There's a listing of all the lake associations in the state, and they should be linked to that lake association's website if we have it, or Facebook page if that's what they're using. Let us know if those are accurate. And I think this will be a lot easier place to land and a lot easier place to find information about MLR and lakes and rivers in Minnesota. So that's uh, some good news from this last year. Legislative outcomes. Again, it was a strange year at the legislature. There were no meetings in person. A lot of what happens at the legislature happens in hallways, or at when you're eating lunch, at lunchroom tables, or catching people in their offices before hours. I remember Tommy Rukavina from up in Virginia, Minnesota, was on the Environment Committee, and Henry and I had a bill, and we wanted to get on a schedule to talk to him about the bill. He was opposed, and we couldn't get in to see him. He was busy. He carried a lot of legislation, and his calendar was full. But being a ranger, Tommy showed up at the office at about 6 in the morning and made coffee. So we showed up at the Capitol at about 6 in the morning, and there he was, and we sat down and had a cup of coffee and worked it out. That kind of stuff can't happen online, so it's challenging. Um, we have some kind of basic principles. We work to support science, and back in 2012, I believe it was, when Peter Sorensen started the idea of the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center. Henry and I met with him a number of times and worked with him as he went through the hearing process, and lobbied for the research center. It was created, and then there was funding that we worked on to build out the lab so they would have the resources they needed, and the equipment that they needed to do the work that they wanted to do. But there was a gap. There was no reliable ongoing funding for the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center, just to meet the day-to-day, to keep the lights on, so to speak. Pay the office expenses. So we've been working on this for a couple of years. And last year we were able to successfully make the case that this was necessary. And the legislature funded MACERC for $910,000. It's a standing appropriation, so it's paid every year. And I think that that'll really allow Nick and the other people over at MACERC to focus more on the science and less on having to go to the Capitol hat in hand every 2 years trying to get a grant, just to fund the space that they work in. We also worked on with Mincola and Safe Wake for Minnesota Lakes to fund a study on wake energy. There was a lot of concern and debate about the energy in boat wakes. Different boats make different types of wakes, and people were most concerned about the wakes and prop wash of wake surfing boats, these boats that have the large ballast tanks. They create large wakes, and people surf the wakes. So they're surfing behind the boat without a tow rope. They go slow, maybe 10 knots, and make these large wakes. There was no reliable data that would indicate what best practices are for these boats, or really for any boats. I've said before that if I'm in my grandma's old 18-foot Lund with the 15 horsepower motor on it, or 25 or whatever, and I'm running it through a wild rice bed, I can cause a great deal of damage, or too close to shore or in the shallows. So we work together with Mincola and Safe Wakes for Minnesota Lakes, and and the St. Anthony Falls Lab at University of Minnesota to fund a study into wake energy of different types of boats. They tested two boats to start with. They tested a wake boat and kind of a regular runabout, open bow, crestliner, I think it was, inboard, outboard type of boat. They have the data. They are releasing a report on that soon. Maybe within the next few weeks, I'm hoping, maybe before legislative session starts, probably not too long after that. And that data can be used, that report can be used to guide policymaking, best practices. So, how deep should you be when you open it up? How far from shore should you operate? And then create a watercraft operator certification to teach this to people who are operating boats. Um, uh, so that we were able to get that funded. The other thing we were working on was aquatic plant management grants to lakes. We were able to get $850,000. It's one-time funding, and it's on top of the $450,000 that is a standing appropriation from the DNR to assist lake associations in treating lakes for invasive species. This 850 is 1 year, so it will have to go out in 1 year. Um, Back in, I think it was 2010, even before that, there was a $850,000 aquatic plant management grant from the DNR. As their budgets moved into the red, they cut that back to 450 and then zeroed it out. We were able to get it back up to 450. We've been trying to get it back up to 850. The compromise was this one-time funding for this year. Next year, we'll be working on making it permanent if we can. We're working now with the DNR, kind of in a process as to how they want to roll this money out. It will be coming out, I think, early next year. We're planning on a webinar a few weeks in advance. We'll get a notice out to everybody. Jake from the DNR will lead the webinar on how to apply, what the money can be used for, what the different amounts are. So if you have a large, complex program, well, then there's maybe money to support the science so that you can document what you're doing. If it's just you're treating 10 acres, and then it's maybe a smaller matching grant of a few $1,000s. We were able to successfully get a grant from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. That is the fund that's created by the lottery proceeds. So when people buy a lottery ticket, some of the money goes into this Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund account. The Legislative Citizens Commission on Minnesota Resources, LCCMR, makes recommendations. And MLR was awarded a $1 million grant to put CD3 boat cleaning stations at the accesses of lakes that are infested with starry stonewort. The idea here is shield, or contain. So we're going to try and contain AIS in the lakes where it currently exists so that it doesn't spread to the rest of the state. The other piece that we were able to work on last session successfully was $910,000 in No Child Left Inside grants. And that money is for education for kids. If you have a sailing program or a youth fishing program, or you want to do youth education about lake ecology for a Boy Scout troop or a Girl Scout troop or a 4-H club, you can apply for this money to help fund that effort. We also did something new last year. We launched programs, and we haven't really done programs before in that, you know, kind of a packaged effort that lake associations can use to serve their missions. The first one was Dorothy Whitmer's Lake Steward program. And last year was the first year of it. Up the Creek Meets, I think, was in year 2. That effort has been really kind of stalled by the pandemic. It's been hard to connect people. We have the Stop Starry program, which was funded by Environment Natural Resources Trust Fund. And then Project WET, which is a program in Minnesota and nationwide and actually worldwide that provides curriculum for water study. And it provides curriculum for kids to adults, for teachers in a high school science class, to a layperson that is going to be making a presentation or at a booth in a street fair or an arts fair or something like that. So it's very, very flexible. Lake Steward has been a great, great program. We had 29 lake associations sign up for it, do the training, contact me, and I think put out the Lake Steward quiz. Are you a lake steward? Does your shoreline protect water quality? It's this open-ended question. You put this out on your Facebook page or you email it to your members. They take the quiz. And that quiz generates a score and a response that then your lake association gets. And you can follow up with them and do a site visit. And if they meet the criteria for Lake Steward, they are awarded a sign. And you can see some of the people at the bottom of the screen there with their signs. Very powerful and very popular. 29 lake associations signed up. We did about 160 individual assessments, so site visits across the state. And I'm not sure how many Lake Steward signs were awarded yet. I need to we're going to have a meeting in a couple of weeks with the volunteers and the lake associations that participated, kind of review what happened last year, quantify whatever data we're able to capture, like how many awards were given, how many feet of shoreline were preserved, how many acres are associated with that. And so we can start to assess our progress with this. The benefits for the lake associations are pretty profound. I saw direct evidence that it promotes membership. So people see the signs, they take the quiz, they want to participate, and they join or their neighbors join. Protects shorelines, obviously educates owners. But what happens is owners educate their neighbors because people see the sign, say, "What's that?" And then one owner starts to tell their neighbors about it. And then it starts to shift the aesthetic away from kind of a more urban landscape, a highly groomed, suburban style yard, to something that is more native and provides habitat for insects and birds and animals and protects water quality. It really is a great branding tool for your lake association because those signs are on the shore, and as people go along the shoreline, they'll see the sign and they'll see your lake association logo in a way that connects it with the mission of your lake association. Oh, so the lake association protects the lake, right? Water quality. They see it on the sign. So it was highly successful. We're going to continue it. Up the creek meets, uh, agricultural runoff is one of the largest causes of surface water pollution in the state. And it comes largely from runoff. Uh, if you use regenerative agriculture and the soil health principles, and you farm in a different way than how we've been farming for some time, uh, your land, the farmer's land, will infiltrate water, meaning it soaks in rather than runs off. And the difference can be dramatic. So, one corn and bean field, it had been corn and beans for 80 years. Lots of chemicals, fungicides, herbicides, pesticides, right? And there's nothing living in the soil. There's no worms, there's no mycelia, no mushrooms, no fungus, no insects. It is a medium that keeps the plant from falling over. And then the plant lives, the crop lives on what you add to it, the nitrogen, the phosphorus. The pests are controlled by herbicides. That soil had a 0.5% of organic content, uh, and it could infiltrate a 1/2 inch of rain in an hour. So if you got more than 1/2 inch of rain in an hour, well, then it ran off. But using the soil health principles, which include grazers, right? The land in Minnesota was grazed. There were ungulates here. There were elk and caribou and buffalo grazing these grasses, moving through areas and eating the prairie plants. And what that does is it extends the roots down into the soil more deeply and kind of breaks the soil up and adds natural fertilizers. But they're also finding that it also adds a lot of the funguses and little critters that live in the soil. So it accelerates the process. And it's very well mapped out how often you have to move the cattle and all of these things. But after 6 or 8 years of practicing this, one farmer we've been working with was able to get his organic content of his soil up to 3%. So he's now infiltrating 3.5 inches of rain an hour. So he went from 1/2 inch of rain an hour, and then it would run off to 3.5 inches of rain an hour. 1 inch of rain per acre is 25,000 gallons. So he's storing now 75,000 gallons of water per inch of rain in his land. He's turned off his irrigator. I went out there this summer to see him and pick up some meat. And everything was kind of brown this summer until you got to his place and it was green. And he didn't need to irrigate. It's kind of remarkable. They're finding that they can actually have yields that approach the yields they had when they were doing more conventional farming over a period of time. As their soil health improves, the farm becomes more productive. They also have more diversity in what they're producing because that's part of what this type of farming entails. It is more labor intensive. So while these farmers are saving money on irrigation, diesel fuel for plowing and harrowing and spraying, chemicals and so forth for fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, they're saving that money, but they're spending more time, which means that you need more people working on the farms, which means that it's better for local communities. There's more work there. I think it's a remarkable shift. I know that at the University of Minnesota now, they're starting to try and figure out if they can measure the amount of carbon that's captured in this way. They know that farmland is a big source of release of atmospheric carbon, and it can also be stored. How do you measure that? So I think this is a really great program, connecting people who value water with farmers who are raising food in a way that protects water. And I'll say this, throughout this whole pandemic, when meat was getting expensive or hard to find and chickens were hard to find, and there was no disruption. I just would go out to Abe's place and pick up a box of meat, and it was, the supply chain was not impacted by the pandemic at all. So I would encourage you to, call me or email me, find out about this program and how you connect with it. I think it's very, very powerful. Project Wet. This is back, I think, maybe 30 years ago. People will remember that Chesapeake Bay was in deep, deep trouble, highly polluted. They had lost their crab and oyster and bluefish. It was kind of dying. It was a dead zone. Highly, lots of algae and low oxygen levels and so forth. And they came together to try and save it. And the first thing they did was get water-based education, so the study of aquatic sciences, into the schools in all the communities surrounding the bay. So kids began to learn about water sciences and about protecting water and how to protect it and what services it provided and how critically important it was. As those children grew, they began to take steps within their businesses or their lives or their vocations to protect water. It became a norm, right? Now Chesapeake Bay is almost fully recovered. There's dolphin pods. The fishing has returned. The industries, the water-based industries, crabbing and oysters and so forth, are coming back. It's a huge success story. 56% of Minnesota's surface waters are impaired. That's a big deal. We added 305 just a couple weeks ago. Some came off. About 100 came off the impaired waters list, but we added 300. So we're still not moving in the right direction. Connecting with kids and educating them about water in the places where we find them, schools, street fairs, playgrounds, youth clubs, is a big piece of the solution. And what Project Wet does is it's a training course that you can take. It's online. And when you complete the course, you contact the educator. Her name is Janine Cohen. If you want to learn more, you'll find a webinar about this in more detail on our website. Or you could email Kayla or I. And you get access to their educational materials. And they're set up so that you could do an educational piece on what a watershed is on a table at an art fair, and it's interactive. Or there's everything between that and serious curriculum for a high school class that happens outside or is focused on water. So it's kind of the whole gambit. And if you're not a professional educator, they've got curriculum for you. If you are a professional educator, they've got curriculum for you. So we're trying to partner with Project Wet to get this water education out into our communities and really start raising people's understanding of how water moves through our landscape, how it is impaired, why it's impaired, how we can prevent that from happening. So I'm excited about Project Wet as well. And then the Stop Starry program. This actually is a great story. It came out of the boat cleaning equipment. Came out of I think it was back in 2014. Mincola and MLR partnered to try and get a grant from the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council to buy decontamination units for boat accesses. and we were turned down. But instead, they created a $4.5 million fund to fund AIS innovations, and it was administered by the Initiative Foundation up in Little Falls. And one of the projects that came through were these guys that wanted to make a boat cleaning station, a self-operated boat cleaning station. Those of you who attended the 2016 or 2018 AIS Aquatic Invader Summit saw some of these early units. This summer, they passed 1 million uses, which is amazing. It is an educational tool as well as a practical tool. There was data that came out of Cornell University some years ago that it was based on surveys of anglers, and they found that like 96% of all anglers knew every step they had to take in order to prevent spreading aquatic invasive species, but only about 35% took every step. And the reason they didn't take all the steps is because they didn't have what they needed to take the steps. For instance, they're coming off the water and it's dark and they can't see under the boat and they figure it's good enough. They can't reach. They don't have any way to get the last little bit of water out of the bilge. So they weren't, fully cleaning, draining, and drying. But that's what these tools provide. So our process here was to say, okay, we've got 17 lakes that currently have starry stonewort, 28 accesses. Let's put this equipment on each access of every lake that's infested with starry stonewort. And then let's do a deep community organizing effort over a period of 3 years minimum to really rally the community around using this equipment. Research from MACER shows that once a lake becomes infested with starry stonewort, the lakes within a 50-mile radius are at much higher risk. So it spreads kind of locally, people moving from lake to lake locally. So there's a huge local incentive to use this equipment. Since the grant came through, we've had another couple more lakes added, a couple more accesses. So we're struggling a little bit to figure out how we're going to cover those or if we'll be able to cover them. The costs have gone up since the grant went in because of, supply chain issues. But we're going to do the best we can. But this idea of building support, building an ethic around protecting water by using these machines locally, I think is a really good start at shifting the the mindset of a community. Oh yeah, I mean we have lakes everywhere, and we think, oh yeah, the lake, the lake, the lake. Well, we need to take care of the lakes, and if we take care of them, they'll take care of us. And I think that this is a good program for doing that. The civic organizing approach, I think, to say it as simply as I possibly can, begins with defining the problem. So and this is the work that Kayla is going to be doing, is we're not going to show up in a community and say, okay, here's how you're going to do it, right? We're going to show up and say, okay, what's the problem? If we put this unit here, will people use it? How do we encourage them to use it? What does that look like? In one area of the state that we've been working with, the barrier was the ramps are busy, people are busy, they don't really get what this is, they're in a hurry to get out, and they're not going to want to use it. And so the solution there was better signage, pavement markings, system of lights, red light, green light kind of thing. And that county, Hennepin County, has just surpassed 100,000 uses this, I think, a couple weeks ago, which is a lot. That's somebody taking action to remove AIS from their boat, or to dry it fully. Other parts of the state, it's the units are going to be remote, and people don't want to be, told what to do, or uh, vandalism could be an issue. So we're going to need different solutions, different methods, and different partners. And finding those partners and overcoming those barriers is really what this community organizing portion of the project is about. The legislative agenda, that we're looking at for 2022 is the wake surfing issue that's kind of writ large. Uh, the solution, working with the boating industry and marina operators and others, is let's create a boat operator certification. I think Minnesota is like one of only 7 states that doesn't currently have one. Wisconsin has one, Illinois has one, I know Michigan has one. Um, and teach people how to operate safely, how to operate in a way that doesn't affect other users. That etiquette piece. Um, how to fully clean, drain, dry, and why it's important. What happens to lakes when they become overrun with AIS? What happens to fishing? What happens to property values? And the whole prop wash and shoreline erosion problem. 1 pound of phosphorus, right, can produce 500 pounds of algae in a lake. And just runoff from shore can be, you know, half a pound. I mean, if there's uncontrolled runoff into a lake. So if you're washing shoreline away or churning up the bottom and reanimating those sediments, you're adding a ton of phosphorus to the water. How deep does prop wash go? How long does it take wakes to dissipate to the point where they're not a threat to the shoreline? What is the role of aquatic plants in preventing impacts to shoreline? Um, and it's large. So a little bit of lake ecology, I think, needs to be part of this program. One of the things, my mother's family is from northern Minnesota, and when I was a kid, um, the it was before the gun safety training, and the ethic and the whole way people hunted was very, very different than it is now. But when they came in with the gun safety training, and I took it with my daughters, they talked a lot about ethics and a lot about protecting the resource, protecting the ecology of the resource. They got into, what habitat looks like and why it's important. And this has really been a boom, I think, to kind of sportsmen in the country. They are very well informed on the ecological aspects of their sports. I think we could get the same sort of thing happening with lakes. And right now it seems to be in short supply. So that's the approach we're taking for the wake surfing. Figure out what the impacts are, what the impacts of wakes are, what the best management practices are, educate people, and then hopefully the problem resolves. If not, take next steps, but start there. Um, Aquatic plant management. I've been getting a lot of calls, emails for years now, and it seems like, you know it it's kind of it's lake associations have no authority on the lakes, but when there's a problem, they have all the responsibility. all the expense. We have very detailed programs for managing forests in the state. We have detailed programs for managing prairies and wetlands and fens and different types of habitats in the state. We have really no program for managing our lake ecology. And it's sort of left up to the lake associations. And it's done by this permitting process for treating lakes with chemicals or hand pulling or mechanical harvesters or whatever the method is. Even planting things, you need a permit. And it seems like the permits are often have a lot of requirements on them, a lot of point intercept studies that have to be done that are expensive. The timing of the permits, maybe you get your permit after it's the peak time to the best time to treat. Um, it isn't working well. So I would like to focus in on that this session and begin to take action. One of the good things that happened last year was we're starting to standardize the permitting information so that the data that's collected when people apply for a permit is standardized so that you can compare it and use it as a baseline for research. Before last year, it was just sort of scattershot. Ended up in a drawer. You couldn't pull it. It wasn't. It wasn't what it needed to be in order to advance our understanding of what's happening on our lakes during this period of change. We need to do much better on that, I think. Boat ramp improvements is another one. There's been an effort to improve boat ramps. We would like to improve them so that there is, maybe less congestion and they're safer and maybe there's more parking spots or less parking spots or better parking spots, but also that the infrastructure is in place to facilitate AIS inspections and decontaminations. Since we started, we've been calling for a comprehensive statewide AIS plan. And last year, there was a bill introduced that would require the DNR in partnership with their partners, which would be lake associations, county AIS coordinators, and others, tribal governments, anybody who is doing this work, basically, and coordinate our efforts and create a statewide comprehensive AIS plan. Define the jurisdictions, define the roles, figure out where. Okay. So we're going to keep pushing that. Changes to the decontamination process. One of my main complaints has always been we're spending millions of dollars to try and find these boats that are infested with aquatic invasive species. And we find one. It's got zebra mussels growing on the hull, right? And all we can do is say, you can't launch here. You have to go clean your boat. And the person leaves the parking lot. And we have no idea what happens to them. They could go down the road, go to the next access and launch. We don't know. They could scrape them off in the storm drain and it washes, the next storm washes them into the local lake. We don't know. That's a huge gap. So we need to fix that process so that when we find a boat that is infested with aquatic invasive species, we can document that that boat has been successfully decontaminated before it launches again. No export of Minnesota water. I've been talking about this for a long time, and it's continuing to be a conversation that is increasing in urgency as the Southwest and Western states, as those droughts expand, more and more people are looking to Minnesota and Minnesota's water. And we need to begin a deliberate conversation about that issue and what that looks like, and how to navigate that. So that will be a focus. There were some changes in the law made last year. I think we can take another couple steps there. And then I put out an email on this about a week ago. And what happened during the pandemic in Minnesota, of course, is people went to the woods. They went to the lakes. The parks have been full. The lakes have been full. 30% increase in lake usage, over the last 2 years, and fishing license sales and everything. We've been out enjoying the state, which is great, right? People have been buying lakeshore properties, which is great. It has been fueling a real estate market on lakes that is increasing the assessed value of property on lakes, which means property taxes are going up. In addition, this is kind of happening at the same time that the state funding has been flattened out a little bit. But one of the things, funding for local communities. But one of the things that happened with this pandemic relief legislation that was passed just a few months ago, or earlier this year, I guess, by the Biden administration, is there's a lot of money for local communities. And I'm hoping that this is going to end up buying down that property tax burden to some degree. So we're going to be looking for some sort of relief, some sort of stabilization for property tax in this next legislative session. There may well be a tax bill. This is a bonding year, not a tax year. But it's the right time to begin the discussion and see if there isn't some solutions that can be found. This over here. And this is the last, one of the last new things I have to show you is our logo. The new Minnesota Lakes and Rivers logo. So you'll start to see this on our letters and on our emails and on anything we're putting out. Again, to me, this sort of speaks to the idea of people in place over time, families on lakes, in this case, a bobber fishing. But it's not about preservation of the resource, it's about stewardship of the resource over time through generations, multi-generational stewardship of our lakes and rivers in Minnesota. So the membership piece, one of the efforts that MLRs that I'm hoping we're really going to be able to advance is the idea of membership. And I had hold on a second here. Got a I want to ask you a question here. So the question is, what is the top reason you have become a member of Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Advocates? And just select one. Oh, what happened? Where did it go? Sorry, for some reason it cut out there. Well, it looks like it's kind of a three-way split, pretty much. Unifying Lake Association community into a unified and therefore more powerful voice. Information, education, and communication on lake issues, and direct lobbying at the legislature. Interesting. Okay. Let me let me ask you one more question here, if I might. Um, well, here's a good one. This is kind of getting back to our um, property tax roots and our legislative agenda. So about 5 to 10% looks like. And that's interesting. That's about what we were getting back on the email I sent out. There were some. I saw two that were close to 50% increase. And then one last question here, and this will be useful. Well, I guess two more questions. Out of the items I listed on our legislative agenda, what are your top priorities? So almost an even split between the watercraft operator certification and requiring the DNR to write a comprehensive statewide plan. Looks like people are still voting here, though, so I'll leave it open for another few seconds. And then there's one last one here that maybe is a little bit is more focused on lake associations, and maybe the people who run the lake management plans aren't online. This one might be harder for everyone to answer, but this is really getting at that idea of looking at the whole permitting process for DNR lake management. So really lack of flexibility, and it's just unfair. I mean, I've often thought, lakes are a state resource, state forests are a state resource. Imagine if the people whose land was adjacent to a state forest were required to pay the money necessary to protect the state forest from fire or to plant trees or do whatever it was that needed to be done to manage the state forest. People would think that's absurd, but they have no problem asking lake associations made up of lakeshore owners to pay the cost. That's interesting. Thank you for that. Um, so membership, obviously, I think people recognize the need to grow as an organization. There are about 300,000 lake home and cabin properties in the state of Minnesota, and MLR has about 3,000 members that we've had, more or less a couple hundred either way for the last few years. And I think that in order to really begin to take next steps in a large way, um, if we could get that number up to 5 or 6,000 or 10,000 active, engaged members, informed on our issues, up to speed on what's happening at the legislature and engaging with their elected officials, working at the local level, partnering with local civic groups to get work done on the lakes and local resource managers, making use of the grants and the opportunities that are available, kind of all that information that comes with being part of a group like ours. It would have a huge impact on water quality and the state. So we're going to be working on that this year, and I may call some of you from time to time to participate in a focus group or to run different ideas past you. If you have the time, I'd be grateful. If you have any ideas for me, I would be grateful. So I just kind of wanted to plant this bug in your ear that it would be good if we could grow some in the next couple of years here. And I want to thank you all. I'm really grateful to all of you for attending and for the work that you do. And I got to say, it's kind of a wonderful thing to be able to get up in the morning and go to work doing something I believe in for people that I really like and respect. So thank you very much. Are there any questions? You can use the chat feature. Um, I think. Oh, it looks like Kayla's been answering some here. Uh, the agenda says 850,000 in addition to the 450 for aquatic plant management. Um, and that isn't by county, Mike. That is through the DNR. That's statewide. And yes, that is exactly what that means. I'm not sure how they're going to break this money out. They're looking at kind of putting it in different pots, but it's through the DNR grants. Uh, are the grant? It's not the county grants. Oh, Kayla's email is not on the website. Lily pads covering the shoreline. Are they new? Is it a new thing with these lily pads covering the shoreline? They will. Any shoreline vegetation will help dissipate wake energy or wave energy and protect shoreline. So that's kind of a good thing. I don't know if anybody else heard this, but when I was a kid, we were taught never to pick the white water lilies; that they were protected. And then there was my mom had this old wives' tale that if you picked a white water lily, it would rain the rest of the vacation. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard that or if that's something that she just made up. Any other questions? You can use the chat feature. Oh, thanks, Kayla, for the impaired waters list. Yeah, and that was updated today. Yes, I am recording this, and you can have access to it. Um, yeah, and Bob, you could definitely gift memberships. Just contact the office or fill out the form and contribute what you think is appropriate, and then they'll be in our system and they'll start getting our materials. 1917 was your fifth generation. That's wonderful. We're kind of in the same situation on our family. Our place was originally bought by my great great grandfather, who was a miner up in Tower, and bought a bunch of land out on. It had just been logged out on Pine Island in probably about 1917. Was yours? I imagine we were close to that. Um, yeah, and the list grew larger because of the PFAS chemicals. Were added to impairments, and more mercury from, but it's atmospheric mercury. Another piece, Mike, is atmospheric phosphorus. So, given the droughts and people farming out west, they kick up dust clouds that carry over into Minnesota, and the dust settles on the lakes and is adding phosphorus to the lakes. So, it that's part of the problem. So the idea is control what you can control. So if there's phosphorus coming from the atmosphere or mercury coming from the atmosphere, what can we do locally to minimize those impacts? Oh yeah, Tom, we should. So next time there's a drought, I'm going to pick water lilies. I agree. That's a good idea. Maybe my mom is right. It would be the time to find out. Any other questions? Oh, Al. Thanks so much, Al. Those are very kind words, and I'm grateful to you. I'm not seeing any other questions. Well, we've been going an hour and 15 minutes, and we will have a recording of this available. And please peruse the new website. And thank you, thank you, thank you. And be well and stay safe. And hopefully next year we'll be doing this in person somewhere. And it will be a really good time. I'm grateful. Have a good evening. Thank you.